Good evening. Good evening. My apologies for our delay. We have had some technical difficulties on tonight as we are watching live the president and the people discuss the issues that are going on in our nation to try to do what he can as the voice of our nation to solidify and unify the injustices that we have witnessed, in addition to the issue of racism that is existent and has existed in a long time. And so, as we talk on this Speak Truth Radio on the Melting Pot Radio Network, wanted to make sure that we identified the scripture again that is a basis of our belief and process. John chapter 8, verse 32 says, and I quote, "And you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free." I simply wanted to give an opportunity for each and every one of you to hear tonight what our commander in chief is saying, what our commander in chief is doing, and I'm asking for your prayers for our president, as this is probably one of many of the heavy burdens that he has had to bear in his office of the presidency. Be vigilant, be faithful, be prayerful, be peaceful, and do not let the wiles of this nation, the evil that exists, steal your joy. I urge you tonight to reach deep inside of yourself. Instead of looking for a leader, ask yourself, what can I do to lead? One of the things that we want to make sure that we are doing as people of God, as believers, as human beings, the first is to make sure that we are being human beings. We are a part of a human race that requires us to be focused in light of the injustices, in light of the self-hate, in light of the stereotypes, in light of the profiling. We're asked to be focused so that we can make sure that we're doing all we can as our daily activities go about. Do what you can first in your own home, making sure that there is a commonality, making sure there's peace, making sure there's unity, making sure that joy is existing in your own home. And once you have arrived at a place of joy and laughter and peace and love in your own home, then you can spread it abroad, particularly in your workplace, particularly amongst your neighbors. Many people today have arrived at a certain social or economic status where your neighborhoods are diverse and you've moved into a different neighborhood than which you have grown up in. It is now something that you're going to have to deal with. A neighbor who doesn't look like you, a neighbor that you've been colleagues with or friends with, and now all of a sudden, due to the racial divide, due to the tensions, due to the issues that exist in our world, we are torn. I want to take a moment out for you to hear some words of the president tonight.
Throughout all these processes that law enforcement is deserving of due process just like everybody else. So no matter how powerful videos may be or what's been said, everybody deserves to be treated fairly by the justice system. And I have, and Michelle has, police officers in our family. And we know what a tough job they have. And we want to make sure that when incidents happen, however they look, that we have to take a breath and see what exactly has occurred. Now, Lieutenant Governor, what I have said is that the data, and this is not just stuff I make up, I'm aware that my words matter deeply here. The data shows that there are disparities in terms of how persons of color and whites are treated in the aggregate. That doesn't mean in any individual case there's discrimination. It just means that across a lot of different situations, there are discrepancies. And that those aren't good for building trust or making people feel as if they are being treated fairly. And that's not good for police either. And what I've said is we have to address that. And we have to address that honestly. But I think that the one thing that all of us need to do, you and me, is to make sure that we don't pretend as if there aren't potential problems in how police in certain communities interact, and that when we raise those issues or people raise those issues, that the perception is somehow that that's anti-police. That's, I think, what I've tried to express. And I completely agree with you. The protesters have to be peaceful. It's counterproductive if you're not. And if we also acknowledge the fear that communities feel, if a parent sends their kid out to the store and they're not sure whether they're going to have a bad interaction that results in a tragic death, if we can just acknowledge this isn't a matter of us versus them, but it's a matter of all of us together as Americans working to solve this problem, then I think we will solve it. It's going to take a while to get to the point where we want to be, but nobody's more hopeful than me. I'm Mr. Hope when it comes to these issues. I mean, I've said from the start that we are not as divided as we seem, and I think we're going to solve it. But we have to understand that in a country of 300 million people, where the police interact millions of times with individuals, black and white and Hispanic and Asian and Middle Eastern, that there are going to be, there are going to be some problems. And we shouldn't shy away from that. But I am absolutely hopeful that we're going to solve it. But I just want to make this point, particularly for young people. Things are much better than they used to be. They're much better than they used to be. If you think about, for example, crime rates. Under my presidency, violent crime rates have dropped precipitously. We have some of the lowest murder rates today than any time since the 1960s. Much less violent generally in our communities than it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago. That's a sign of hope. And some of that is because of some excellent policing that's been done and communities that are working with police. So we can make progress. It's just we have to be steady about it and make sure that all of us take responsibility rather than worrying about Okay, I want to make sure that I blame somebody else for the problem. That way I don't have responsibility for the solution.
You said you're the most hopeful.
Absolutely.
There might be someone in this room who equals your hope.
What?
Clifton Kinney. He's 19 years old. And Clifton, could you stand up for me?
Good to see you, Cliff.
As you know, Mr. President, he's with Black Lives Matter from Ferguson. You've witnessed so much in that city. And Clifton, you were in the 6th grade when President Obama was elected?
Yes.
You had
Thank you for that, David.
Thank you. I'm not the only one aging.
Thank you for reminding me that I'm getting older.
What were your hopes for this president, and what would you still like to see?
Hello, Mr. President. I would like to thank you for your service and for personally inspiring me as a young organizer from Ferguson. I was 17 when I started organizing in Ferguson, and now I'm a sophomore at Howard University. My question for you today is, what do you envision safety looks like for poor Black and brown communities, as we understand that it is more expansive than policing? And what can you do as you are about to exit office? What can you do to ensure that that vision has groundwork for more progress?
Good. Well, it's a great question. One of the interesting things, Clifton, that I know Chief Brown said in Dallas, but I hear this from chiefs and rank and file all across the country, is that we expect police to solve a whole range of societal problems that we ourselves have neglected. So, and I mentioned this in my remarks at the memorial in Dallas. We have communities without jobs, with substandard schools, where the drug trade is so often considered the only way to make money.
Well, my friends, as you've heard from our president, there are multiple layers to the solution. And I echo his sentiments as it relates to each and every one of us playing a role in the solutions. The policing issue is one layer. The justice system is another layer. Self-hatred is another layer. Inner city crime is another layer. Employment or the lack thereof is another layer. Fatherlessness is another layer. Poverty is another layer. There are so many levels that attribute to issues that are evident in our communities. I've said it, I'll say it again. Black lives matter. All lives matter. But if Black lives matter, and they do, my brothers, put down the guns. If Black lives matter, and they do, my young people, put down the guns. If Black lives matter, and they do, get out and vote. If Black lives matter, as they do, get out to your town hall meetings. If Black lives matter, and they do, vote for the next council, Congress, state senator, solicitor, judge, police chief, mayor. Vote. If Black lives matter, and they do, a human life is irreplaceable. And before we allow the injustices of America to suck the lives out of our brothers and sisters, we must also have that same compassion when we consider taking the life of another human being, be it each other, be it law enforcement, be it whomever. We must stand by what we